The stars burned cold and silent above the wreckage. Among the floating ruins of 1,000 ships, one small vessel drifted, its hull scarred, its lights dim, its engines barely breathing. Inside, Lisa Morgan lay curled on the floor of the cockpit, wrapped in a thin thermal blanket. Her eyes fluttered open, dry and stinging. For a moment she didn't remember where she was. Then it all came back. The alarms, the screams over the comms, the flash of light that swallowed entire fleets whole. She sat up slowly, wincing at the ache in her ribs. The air smelled stale, mixed with burnt wiring and old sweat. Outside the viewport, debris spun lazily in the void. Shattered hull plates, frozen bodies in torn uniforms. The ghostly remains of the Terran Alliance's last stand. Earth was gone. Not just defeated, erased. The Vels had used a planet-cracker weapon, something ancient and forbidden, and turned humanity's cradle into a ring of dust. Lisa wasn't supposed to survive. She'd been stationed on the Wayfarer, a tiny salvage and research ship assigned to the Outer Rim during the final days of the war. When the order came, all non-combat vessels scatter and hide, she'd obeyed. She'd powered down everything but life support, tucked the ship into a graveyard of dead freighters and waited. Weeks passed, then months. No rescue came, no signals. Just silence. Now alone, she checked the ship's systems. Oxygen low but stable, power at 23%. Food rations, enough for maybe 10 more days if she stretched them. The comms panel blinked red. No incoming messages, no beacons, no chatter from allied ships. She tried hailing on every emergency frequency. Only static answered. She walked to the small galley and poured herself a cup of lukewarm water from the recycler. Her hands shook. She hadn't spoken to another person in 83 days. She knew the number because she'd been marking the wall with a piece of charcoal. One line for each sunrise she saw through the viewport, even though there was no sun here. Just distant stars. On the table sat a cracked photo frame. In it, a younger Lisa smiled beside her younger brother, Jake, both of them standing in front of their house in Colorado. Snow on the ground, hot cocoa in their hands. Jake had joined the fleet at 17. She never got confirmation if he made it off Mars before the Vels glassed the colony. She liked to imagine he did. That somewhere, he was still out there. But deep down, she knew better. The Vels weren't like other enemies. They didn't negotiate. They didn't take prisoners. They saw individual thought as a disease, chaos as a virus. To them, humanity, with its art, its arguments, its messy, beautiful freedom, was an infection that needed to be cleansed from the galaxy. And they'd nearly succeeded. Lisa returned to the cockpit and stared out at the emptiness. No planets. No stations. Just the endless dark. She wondered if this was how it felt to be the last of your kind. Not with a bang, but with a slow, quiet fade. No one to mourn you. No one to remember your name. Then something flickered on the long-range scanner. A signal. Faint. Distorted. But real. Her heart jumped. She leaned forward, fingers flying over the console, boosting gain, filtering noise. It wasn't a distress call. It was a broadcast. Clean, strong, repeating every 30 seconds. She played it through the speakers. A voice, smooth and emotionless, spoke in the Vel's guttural tongue. She understood enough from her linguistics training to catch the key words. Extinction confirmed. Species terminated. Galaxy purified. It was a victory announcement. They thought they'd won. They thought she was gone. Lisa sat back, stunned. Then slowly, a strange feeling rose in her chest. Not fear, not sadness, but something harder. Something sharper. Anger, maybe, or pride. She wasn't dead. She was still here. Breathing. Thinking. Remembering. She looked at the photo of her brother again, then at the silent stars. If they believed humanity was finished, let them keep believing. But she would not vanish quietly. Not while she still had a voice. Not while she still had a ship. She reached for the comms log and opened a new file. Her fingers hovered over the keys. "This is Lisa Morgan," she said softly, recording. "I don't know if anyone will hear this, but if you do, know that we were here, we mattered, and we're not all gone yet." Outside, the wreckage drifted on, but inside the Wayfarer, something stirred. Small, fragile, but alive. The last human in the galaxy took a deep breath and began to speak. Days turned into weeks, and Lisa settled into a quiet rhythm aboard the Wayfarer. She woke with the dim glow of the cockpit lights, checked the ship's systems, ate a small meal of rehydrated stew, and spent hours listening to old recordings. Voices of friends, news reports from before the war, even silly songs from her childhood. They filled the silence, if only for a little while. Her only companion was a small maintenance drone she'd found in the cargo hold. It had a cracked casing and a wobbly arm, but it still worked. She named it Buddy. It couldn't talk, but it followed her around, beeping softly when she moved. Sometimes she talked to it just to hear her own voice. One morning, while cleaning the comms panel, she replayed the Vel's victory broadcast. Something about it nagged at her. The words were clear, the tone confident, but the phrasing felt off. In her old job as a xenolinguist, she'd studied how different species structured their language. The Vels usually spoke in perfect unison, every word chosen by the collective mind. But this message, it had tiny pauses, slight shifts in tone, almost like hesitation. She played it again and again. Then she compared it to older Vel's transmissions she'd saved in the ship's archive. The difference was small, but real. This wasn't the voice of a united hive. It sounded like someone trying too hard to sound sure. A thought crept into her mind. Maybe the Vels weren't as strong as they claimed. That idea changed everything. Instead of just surviving, Lisa began to plan. If the Vels were unsure, if even one part of their collective doubted their victory, then maybe there was a chance. Not to fight back with weapons, but with something the Vels could never understand: human expression. She spent days digging through the ship's databanks. She found music. Old jazz tunes, rock songs, lullabies. She found poems written by soldiers during the war. She found recordings of children laughing, of markets bustling, of rain falling on city streets. All the little things that made humanity messy, loud, and alive. She started building a new message. Not a plea for help, but a statement, a proof that humans had been more than just soldiers or enemies. They had been dreamers, artists, parents, friends. Buddy helped her splice the files together. Lisa recorded her own voice reading a short poem she'd written as a girl about fireflies in her backyard. She added a clip of her mother singing a bedtime song. She even included the sound of her brother Jake laughing during a family game night. When it was done, she stared at the file on the screen. It was raw, imperfect, human. Now came the hard part: sending it. The Wayfarer's main transmitter was damaged, but she could still use the emergency beacon. It wasn't strong, but if she bounced the signal through dead satellites and abandoned relay stations, it might travel farther than anyone expected. She spent 2 sleepless nights reprogramming the system, routing the message through a web of old Alliance networks. Finally, she pressed send. The signal pulsed out into the void, carrying laughter, music, and Lisa's quiet voice saying, "We were here." She didn't expect an answer. She just hoped someone, anyone, would hear it and remember. Days passed. Nothing happened. She rationed her food, fixed a leak in the water recycler, and tried not to think about how alone she really was. But then on the 5th night after the broadcast, Buddy beeped urgently from the comm station. Lisa rushed over. A new signal had come in. Not from the Vels. Not from a military channel. It was weak, encrypted, but clearly not automated. Someone had replied. Her hands trembled as she decrypted it. The message was short, just a string of coordinates and 3 words. "You are not alone." Her breath caught. It couldn't be real. Maybe it was a trick. Maybe the Vels had found her and were playing a cruel game. But the encryption key, it matched an old Alliance civilian protocol, one used by traders and scientists, not soldiers. She checked the coordinates. They pointed to Keswick 7, a neutral trade world far from the war zones, a place where humans had once lived in secret, hidden among other species. For the first time in months, Lisa felt something like hope. She looked at Buddy, who tilted its head at her. "Someone heard us," she whispered. She didn't know who had sent the message. She didn't know if they could help. But they knew she existed. And that changed everything. She began preparing the Wayfarer for travel. Fuel was low, but if she shut down non-essential systems, she might make it. She plotted a course through quiet sectors, avoiding known Vels patrols. It would take weeks, maybe months. But for the first time since Earth fell, she had a destination. As the ship's engines hummed to life, Lisa looked out at the stars. Not as a graveyard, but as a path. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was reaching out, and somewhere out there someone was reaching back. On the dusty streets of Keswick 7, Daniel Cruz wiped grease from his hands and squinted at the sky. The twin suns were setting, painting the market stalls in orange and red. He'd spent the day fixing old comms units for traders, a job that paid just enough to keep his small apartment warm and his secret safe. Daniel wasn't fully Keswick. His mother had been human, one of the last to flee Earth before the Vels came. She'd hidden on this world, married a local merchant, and raised Daniel in silence. She never spoke of Earth, not really, only in whispers. Late at night, when she thought he was asleep, she'd hum old songs, tell stories about oceans and snow, and sometimes cry without making a sound. She died 5 years ago. Daniel kept her few belongings in a locked box under his bed. A faded photo, a broken music player, and a small silver locket with a tiny picture of a little boy. His uncle, she'd said once. That night, after closing his repair shop, Daniel tuned an old receiver to scan deep space frequencies. He did this every evening, a habit he'd kept since he was a child. He didn't expect to hear anything. The war was over. Humanity was gone. Everyone said so, but then a sound, soft at first, like static. Then a voice. A woman's voice, calm and tired, reading a poem about fireflies. Then music. Real music, not the synthetic beats most worlds use now. Then children laughing. The sound of rain. Daniel froze. His hands gripped the edge of the table. He knew that lullaby. His mother used to sing it to him when he was sick. The same tune, the same gentle rhythm. His heart pounded. This wasn't a recording from an archive. It felt alive, present. He replayed the signal again and again. Buried in the audio was a repeating beacon, a simple pulse with a hidden data tag. Using his mother's old decryption key, a string of numbers she'd made him memorize just in case, he unlocked a short message. "You are not alone." Tears filled his eyes. He hadn't cried since his mother's funeral. Someone was out there, a human, maybe the last one. He spent the next 2 days tracing the signal's path. It bounced off dead satellites and old Alliance relays. But he followed the trail like a hunter. Finally, he pinpointed a rough location near the Orion Arm's edge, a graveyard of war wrecks. He knew he couldn't go alone. He needed a ship, fuel, and people who wouldn't ask too many questions. He went to the spaceport and found Elena Rojas, a pilot with a reputation for flying into trouble and out again. She was half Martian, tough as steel, and owed him a favor from a smuggling run gone wrong. "You're telling me there's a live human out there?" she asked, arms crossed, eyes narrow. "I heard her voice," Daniel said, "and I know the song she sang." Elena studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded. "My ship's ready, but we'll need help. The Vales patrol that sector like hawks." They gathered a small crew, a Keswick engineer named Tari who hated the Vales for burning her village, a quiet ex-soldier named Jin who'd lost his whole unit in the last battle, and a young hacker called Maya who could blind sensors with a few lines of code. They called their ship the Dawn Runner. It wasn't fancy, just a patched-up freighter with hidden weapons and a fast jump drive. But it was enough. As they prepared to leave, Daniel stood on the ramp and looked back at the city. He'd spent his whole life hiding what he was. Now, for the first time, he was proud of it. Meanwhile, far away in the dark, Lisa Morgan heard nothing. She didn't know Daniel existed. She didn't know anyone was coming. She only knew she'd sent her message into the void, and now she had to keep moving. Her ship groaned as it pushed through debris fields. Buddy beeped warnings about low power. She ignored them. She had a destination now. Even if no one met her there, she would arrive. She would stand on solid ground one more time and say, "I am human." Back on Keswick 7, the Dawn Runner lifted off under cover of night. Its engines whispered against the wind. Inside, Daniel held his mother's locket tight. He wasn't just rescuing a stranger. He was bringing home the last piece of his family, and maybe, just maybe, the last spark of a species that refused to die. Deep in Vel's space, the High Conclave gathered in the heart of their central hive ship. Towering spires of black alloy pulsed with faint light as thousands of minds linked together, sharing thought, memory, and purpose. But for the first time in centuries, that unity trembled. The human signal had spread, not loudly, not with force, but like a seed carried on the wind. It had reached trade posts, mining colonies, even some Vel's outposts. At first, they dismissed it as a glitch, then as a trick, but the signal kept returning, clearer each time, carrying voices that laughed, cried, and dreamed. To the Vels, this was impossible. A dead species could not speak. Chaos could not create beauty, yet the recording showed both. In the conclave chamber, two factions formed. The Purifiers, led by Commander Krell, demanded immediate action. Erase all traces. Krell's voice echoed through the shared mind. Burn every relay, silence every frequency. This noise is a disease. But others disagreed. Among them was observer Nara, a thinker who had studied human culture before the war. We do not understand what we destroy, Nara sent through the link. Their signal is not a weapon. It is a memory, and memory has power. The debate raged for days. Orders were delayed. Patrols hesitated. In one sector, a Vel scout ship ignored a routine sweep because its crew, linked to the conclave, was caught in the mental storm of doubt. Meanwhile, Lisa drifted closer to her goal, an old Alliance listening post called Echo 9. It was hidden inside a dead moon, long forgotten. She'd found its coordinates in a classified file labeled Project Echo. The file was damaged, but one line stood out. In the face of total loss, one voice can reignite hope. She didn't know what that meant exactly, but she trusted it. After 3 tense weeks of travel, avoiding Vel's patrols by hiding in asteroid shadows and powering down all systems, she reached the moon. The Wayfarer docked with a shudder. The airlock hissed open, revealing a dark, empty corridor. Buddy rolled ahead, its small light cutting through the gloom. Lisa followed, her boots echoing on metal floors. The station was cold, but power still flowed in the core. She found the main control room, dust thick on the consoles. Using her clearance code, still valid to her surprise, she woke the system. Screens flickered to life. Files scrolled past. Battle logs, diplomatic records, personal messages from soldiers who never came home. Then she found it. Project Echo wasn't a weapon. It was a message protocol, designed to be activated only if humanity was near extinction. Its purpose? To prove that even one human standing alone was enough to carry the spirit of a whole species. Lisa sat down at the console. Her hands hovered over the keys. She knew what she had to do. She recorded a new message, not with music or old voices, but with herself. Just her speaking plainly, looking into the camera. My name is Lisa Morgan, she said, voice steady. I am the last human I know of. Earth is gone. My family is gone. But I am still here. And as long as I breathe, humanity is not finished. We built cities, wrote songs, loved deeply, and fought for what was right. We were flawed, yes, but we tried. And that matters. She added coordinates to Echo 9 in case anyone wanted to find her. Then she linked the message to every active relay in the sector, using the station's powerful transmitter. The broadcast went out in a single, strong pulse. Back on the Dawn Runner, Daniel's ship picked it up instantly. Maya shouted from the comms station. She's alive. And she's broadcasting from Echo 9. Elena changed course without a word. They were close now, only 2 jumps away. But the Vels heard it too. This time there was no debate. The signal was too clear, too personal. Commander Krell ordered a full assault on Echo 9. Silence the last voice, he commanded. End this. Dozens of warships turned toward the dead moon. Lisa didn't know they were coming. She sat in the quiet control room, watching the stars through a cracked viewport. For the first time, she didn't feel afraid. She felt ready. If they came, they would see her. Not hiding. Not running. Just standing. Because one human alone in the dark was still enough. The Dawn Runner dropped out of jump space with a shudder, its engines cooling in the silent void. Ahead, the dead moon hung like a gray stone against the stars. Echo 9's faint signal blinked on the scanner, steady, strong, and alone. She's still broadcasting, Maya said, her fingers flying over the console. But Vel's ships are closing in. 3 cruisers, 6 fighters. They'll be here in under an hour. Elena gripped the controls. We don't have time for a clean approach. We go in hot. Daniel stood behind her, heart pounding. He'd never been in a real fight. He fixed radios, not weapons. But this wasn't about fighting. It was about reaching her before it was too late. Tari, can you boost our shields? Elena asked. Already on it, the engineer replied, wrench in hand. But we won't last long against cruisers. We don't need to win, Jin said quietly from the gunner's seat. We just need to buy her time. They had a plan. Maya would jam Vel's sensors long enough for the Dawn Runner to slip into the moon's shadow. Jin would lay down covering fire while Elena docked with Echo 9. Daniel would go in and find Lisa. As they neared the moon, alarms blared. They've spotted us, Maya yelled. Red lights flashed. The ship rocked as the first energy blast hit their rear shields. Hold on, Helena shouted, diving toward the surface. Outside, Val's fighters swarmed like angry insects. Jin returned fire, his shots precise and calm. 2 fighters exploded in silent bursts of flame, but more came. Inside Echo 9, Lisa heard the distant thump of impacts through the station's hull. She rushed to the scanner and saw the Dawn Runner weaving through enemy fire. Her breath caught. Someone had come for her. But why? Who were they? She didn't hesitate. She grabbed a survival pack, called for Buddy, and ran for the docking bay. If they were risking their lives for her, she wouldn't let them down. Back on the Dawn Runner, shields dropped to 30%. "We're not gonna make it to the dock," Terry warned. "Then we jump out and run," Elena said. She steered the ship into a narrow canyon on the moon's surface, scraping rock on both sides. The Vel's cruisers were too big to follow. "Go," Elena ordered. Daniel and Jin suited up and leaped from the airlock, boots magnetizing to the moon's crust. They sprinted toward Echo 9's entrance, laser fire streaking past them. Lisa saw them coming through the station's external cam. She opened the inner airlock and waved them in. When Daniel stepped inside, helmet off, Lisa froze. He looked young, scared but determined. And his eyes, they held something familiar. "You're human," she whispered. "Half," he said, breathing hard. "My mother was. She used to sing that lullaby you played." Lisa's eyes filled with tears. She nodded. "We have to go. They're coming." But Jin shook his head. "The Dawn Runner can't take off yet. Shields are fried. We're stuck for at least 20 minutes. Outside, the Vel's cruisers hovered, scanning the surface. They knew she was here. Lisa looked at the console, then at Daniel. An idea formed. "If they want a show," she said, "let's give them one." She rerouted all of Echo 9's power to the main transmitter. "I'm going to broadcast again, but this time live. They'll see me, hear me, know I'm real." Daniel understood. "It'll draw their fire, maybe," she said. "But it'll also show the galaxy what they're trying to kill." She stepped in front of the station's external camera, face calm, voice clear. "My name is Lisa Morgan. I am the last human, and I'm not afraid of you." The message shot across the stars. On a dozen worlds, beings stopped what they were doing. Smugglers, rebels, even some Vel's observers listened. They saw a woman alone, standing tall in the ruins of her people. On the Dawn Runner, Elena watched the feed and smiled grimly. "That's our girl." The Vel's commander Krell stared at the image in fury. "Destroy the station. Now." Energy beams lanced toward the moon. But before they hit, something unexpected happened. One of the Vel's cruisers veered off course. Then another. Their weapons powered down. Nara, the observer, had sent a silent command through the hive link. "Do not erase truth." The conclave fractured further. Confusion spread through the fleet. In that moment of chaos, Elena shouted, "Shields are back! Everyone aboard now!" Daniel grabbed Lisa's hand. Buddy rolled behind them. They ran. As the airlock sealed, the Dawn Runner's engines roared to life. It shot into space just as the first blast struck Echo 9, turning the station into fire and dust. Lisa watched it vanish on the screen. She was safe. For now. But more importantly, she was seen, and the galaxy would never forget her face. The Dawn Runner limped through quiet space, its hull scorched and its systems groaning. But it flew, and inside, for the first time in years, there was hope. Lisa sat in the galley, wrapped in a borrowed blanket, sipping warm broth. Daniel sat across from her, quiet at first, then talking. About his mother, about Keswick 7, about how her broadcast had reached him like a hand in the dark. She listened, nodding, her eyes soft. She wasn't alone anymore. News of her survival spread faster than anyone expected. The live broadcast from Echo 9 had been picked up by traitors, rebels, even neutral worlds that had stayed out of the war. They saw a human, not a soldier, not a monster, just a woman who stood when everything else fell. And that image stirred something deep in others. On the mining colony of Virel, workers shut down Vel's controlled refineries, chanting "One is enough." On the free port of Oris, smugglers began flying human symbols on their ships. Even among the Vels, cracks widened. Observer Nara and others broke away from the hive, forming a quiet resistance that shared human art, music, and stories as acts of rebellion. The war didn't end with a treaty or a battle. It ended because the idea of humanity refused to die. Weeks later, the Dawn Runner arrived at a hidden Alliance remnant base near the Helios Nebula. It wasn't much. Just a few ships, a medical station, and a handful of survivors who'd been hiding since the fall of Earth. When they saw Lisa step off the ramp, they didn't cheer. They just stood in silence, tears in their eyes. Then one by one they bowed their heads, not in worship, but in respect. She wasn't a general. She didn't command armies. But she was proof that their people had meant something. Lisa didn't give speeches. She helped where she could, fixing comms, teaching kids old Earth songs, even helping Tari rebuild a water purifier. She lived simply, but her presence changed everything. New ships flew under a banner with a single word: remember. Daniel stayed close. He'd found family in her and she in him. Sometimes they'd sit on the observation deck watching stars drift by, talking about Jake, about his mother, about what Earth might have been like in spring. One evening, Elena found Lisa there. "You know," she said, leaning on the rail, "they're calling you the spark that lit the new Alliance." Lisa smiled faintly. "I didn't do anything special, I just didn't disappear. That's the most human thing of all," Elena replied. Far away, the Vels struggled to hold their empire together. Without unity, their fleets grew weak. Worlds they once ruled rose up, not with weapons first, but with voices. Singing, speaking, remembering. The galaxy was changing, not through force, but through memory. Lisa never asked to be a symbol. She just wanted to live. And in doing so, she gave others permission to hope. Years later, when new colonies were built on green worlds, children would learn about Earth, not as a lost planet, but as a home that once was. They'd hear Lisa's voice in school playing that old lullaby. They'd see her face in history files, tired, brave, ordinary, and they'd understand she was the last human alive. And that was enough to win the war. Not because she fought the hardest, but because she refused to let the light go out. In a universe that believed chaos was weakness, she proved it was strength. In silence, she spoke. In ruin, she stood. And the stars, once cold and empty, now held a story worth telling. Lisa Morgan never saw Earth again, but she carried it in her words, her songs, her quiet courage. And as long as someone remembered her, humanity would never truly be gone.